All right, everybody, welcome to Wednesday morning. We have with us our very special guest, Andrea Donaldson. Welcome, Andrea. So good to have you part of our Mums with Moxie page today. So we are talking about journaling today, and Andrea is an amazing mum. She's actually written a book about her story as a mum, and I will get her to tell you just the title of it before she leaves us today, because it's a very powerful story. She's also an occupational therapist. She's worked with brain injuries. She's also dealt with anxiety at different times in her life, of just the stresses that come along, and she's dealt with some big ones. And she's going to be sharing on journaling today. She's also got a page called The Art of Journaling, which she might share us with a bit more too later on in our chat. But Andrea, why don't you just share a little bit about your story and how maybe you got started in journaling, or how it's been a support for you?
Well, thinking back, I've always been a writer. As a little kid, one of the favourite things I liked to do was write stories. And I found some of them over at my mum's one day, little stories about dogs and all sorts of things. So I was probably, I don't know, 6 or 7, maybe 7 or 8 when I started just writing for pleasure. Always been a reader. I remember as a kid, Dad used to take us every week to the library and we would borrow books and read, and he really encouraged me particularly. My brother wasn't so into that, but I was. And I think when you read, you then, the extension of that is you have thoughts, and it's really good to write them down because you get a different perspective when you write something down and then you review it later. So throughout my uni days, I became a Christian when I was 15, and so my journaling took a different path once I became a Christian, and I have always pretty much since then every day written something. Might be only a line, but as I read the Bible, I will jot notes about that. I'll also write about what's going in my life. I'll write prayers, and that's a form of journaling as well. And I find that writing things down is just an incredible thing to stumble across your journals years later and realise that thing that was all-encompassing, that was doing your head in, that you didn't think you would ever get through, you did. And so if you hadn't written that down, chances are you wouldn't celebrate the fact that God carried you through that. You did some things and things changed. So I started journaling, very young, and have kept going. And I'm in my 60s now, and it is a mainstay of my life to just spend some time each day in the Word, and write things. And if I'm going through a particularly tough time, I will write more, because our brains are wired in such a way, particularly if you're right-handed, the left brain is often where your language centre is. And when you write with your right hand and you're using your left brain to think about what you want to write, it actually integrates things. So sometimes people say, I feel so much more together when I write something down. Well, there's actually a neurological reason for that. It's bringing things together. And rather than thoughts just buzzing around in your brain and waking you up at night and reminding you that you really need to deal with this, to write it down is also to say, I've got it, and I'll come back to it, and I won't forget this.
Yeah. You've kind of brushed on some of this already, but why would we need to journal? What's a reason why we should take up journaling?
Yeah, it is a great benefit to your mental health. I think some people, you do need to get some professional help to give you perspective to, perhaps if you're battling something that's really quite intense, it's hard to see the wood for the trees. But even journaling can help you. When you put something down in writing, you can actually question it and say, is that true? Or is that just what I'm feeling? So it helps with the fact and feeling stuff. It's actually an adaptive and a creative activity, and you can make it as creative or as non-creative as you like. It's really up to you. I found this groovy little journal at, Kmart. I don't think it was very expensive, but it had some matching stickers.
Aww.
So, sometimes I just like to put a little sticker on the page. But you don't have to. You just need a pen and paper. But there is power in keeping it together in a book because you can go back and review. And I had to do quite a thing for a legal matter recently, and I found all my journals from like the last 20 years were invaluable. There were things in there that I would have completely forgotten. And a journal is different to a diary. I mean, it is your thoughts. I keep a diary as I'm a paper diary person, old school, but something about writing things in a diary and seeing it. I can lose my phone. I've never ever lost my diary.
Hilarious. I'm exactly the same.
And I still haven't worked out those electronic calendars, because they're often American based. They alert you after the event. And it's like, well, that was helpful. Not. Yeah. Anyway, so the other reason that can be really helpful for your mental health is that you can start to track positive habits as you implement them. So just a habit tracker, like a little chart, and tick it off each day. I do that with my water, as I'm doing Rev Up at the moment. You can actually track your mood over a month. And if you're trying to look at sort of hormonal effects and see whether, I am Attila the Hun 3 days leading up to my period. If you track it in a mood tracker, you can go, okay, what am I going to implement those 3 days before so I don't kill my family or they don't kill me, one or the other? Now I'm through the other side of that, but I remember. It can help you to, like I said before, get perspective and be a bit introspective, but give you some visible outcomes so you actually see where your thinking is shifting. So self-improvement. I do funny things in my journal. Like I keep a list of the books I've read. And so when someone says, what's a great book I could be reading, I can go to the back of my journal and go, I read this, it was great. I read this one on Audible, try that. And it just helps me keep a track of what I'm doing. Planning, great way to plan is to put it on paper and then leave it and come back to it a few days later or a week later or sit with someone else and get them to look at it. But if you don't write it down, it's like it didn't happen. I mean, that's my OT training. We were always told, if you don't write in the medical record, it never happened. So you can document hindrances to change. So you might be tracking a habit, but you don't realise that you always fall down at a particular time of day, or you always, it's always Saturday that it all comes undone. So when you actually write it down, you can go, okay, there's the hindrance. What actually happens on a Saturday? Okay, now what could I do to change it? You can take stock of your life over a longer haul and see patterns that you can document the positive effects of gratitude. And I think, there's a lot of evidence out there that gratitude rewires our brains. It takes us down a positive path rather than a negative path. We've had lots of negative things happen in our journey. Everybody does. That's life. But I think if you're not looking for the things you can be grateful for each day, you'll miss them.
Yes,
because they might be minuscule. Yeah.
Yes, and there's a power in using your different senses to proclaim that, isn't it? So you're not just thinking it and feeling it, but you're writing it down, and then even to be speaking that out, it really helps to reinforce it, doesn't it?
And we'll talk about essential oils here, because that's another powerful sense that employs a part of your brain that is not through a logical pathway. It's actually through the central part of your brain and the limbic lobe. If you can engage that in the whole process, it gives another dementia of that whole sensory experience. So sometimes I have used a journal to rant. It's sort of a grounding activity. But if you're angry about something, it can be really powerful to just write it out, like just, you're almost carving into the page some days. And then if you don't want to keep it, if you think, whoa, that is so negative, you can burn it, and that's cathartic anyway. It's sort of like I've dealt with that. Or you can just lay a hand on it and pray over it and say, God, you can see what I think here. Help me to forgive, help me to let go, whatever needs to happen. And when I'm doing that, if I'm doing a rant page, as I call it, I use grounding oil because it really helps me to just calm the farm and bring it all back to a centre rather than just spiral out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Before we get more into essential oils, how would you get started with journaling if you've never sort of been doing something like this before? What would be what start?
Look, I think just think about it as a practice, not a perfect art. I think people think I've got to be perfect at this, and they stumble at that first call. If you write a line, you've journaled. So don't make it bigger than it needs to be.
Yeah.
Get yourself, like I said, a fun book. I found this little book at, I don't know if it'll be back to front, but at Kmart. It wasn't very expensive. I think it was $6 or $7, and it's called My Future in Lists: 150 Prompts for Self-Knowledge. Now, I'm a list writer, but you can just then open to a page and it says, list ways you or your life will change for the better. And you can just write a line. You might write 2 or 3 things for the day and then close the book and open it up somewhere different. And I've been having a bit of fun with that. I might spend a lot of time one day on one list and then other times just a line. So a prompt.
Date them?
No, not necessarily.
No. Yeah.
You could though. You could. There's plenty of room on each page. It's like I'll show you. So here's one: camping spots you'd like to stay.
They're awesome.
So Wye River, Port Arlington, Inverloch. Now, I wouldn't date those, but there's something here. I've got here: list the ways you might help others, lead them to Jesus, point them to natural health. So, it could grow on itself, but if there's something that's specific to a time, you could definitely write a date in the side. And then I found this one. I don't know. I think this was at Kmart too. I spent a lot of time in Kmart with my current job with one of my clients. So this one's called All About You: 2,500 questions to help you know, love and care for you. So now this one you can't necessarily write in it because there's 2,500 questions in here, but there's things like, what are you pretending not to know?
But how good to use those as prompts each day.
Exactly. So if you think, well, what would I write about? That sort of thing is awesome. But if you don't want to spend the money, if you do go onto my Facebook group, The Art of Journaling, I've got some guides in there, and one of them is all about you. And I've just put single questions and then maybe put a photo and something that I've written about. You don't have to write anything on my Facebook group. You can just use the prompts and as a guide, as a starting point, and see if you like that idea.
Get
yourself a fun book to write in, and you don't have to spend a fortune, and a nice pen. Or if someone says, what do you want for your birthday? You could say, I would like a nice journal. Use an oil to help, and we'll talk a bit more about that. I have my diffuser going in the background, but I also use the little lava stone diffuser on my desk. But I also, I'll cover that a bit later. You can go as creative as you like I said before, or you can keep it really simple. And seriously, sometimes journaling, when I've been on holidays and perhaps haven't brought the right journal, I'll journal on the back of a if I'm staying somewhere and they've got a notepad, I'll journal on that, and then I'll take it home and I'll stick it into my journal. It doesn't have to be, it's not a work of art. And the other thing is, no one reads your work unless you want them to. Right? I mean, I don't know if I'll burn all my journals before I die or whether I'll just leave them for my kids to discover. And then they'll go, "Whoa, she was angry at me that day." But she didn't kill me, so that's good. And look, she prayed for me. You can get coloured pens. You can look, the world's your oyster. And there's also there's a thing called bullet journaling. If you really like structure, you could find out about that. Just Google it on Pinterest. And recognise no one marks your work. It's for you. It's a self-care activity. So pour out your heart. And just experience the relief that you get from doing that, and burn it later. Like I said, if you need to, just do it. In the words of Nike.
That's amazing. All right, so you've mentioned essential oils a little bit. I absolutely love things that smell really good. So how does that enhance the journaling experience?
Okay, so essential oils change the state of our brain. And they do it through the power of inhalation. So when we actually smell an oil, we change our brain within 3 seconds. You don't get much more instantaneous than that.
That's amazing.
You can tell me all you like about caffeine. You can say what you like about energy drinks. You can, all the rest, but essential oils, 3 seconds. So I diffuse it. When you do that, within 3 seconds, it's going through to what's called your limbic lobe. And that's the most central part of our brain. It looks after all the automatic functions. So without a limbic lobe and the amygdala and all of that technical stuff, we wouldn't remember to breathe. Our heart would stop beating. So we're fearfully and wonderfully made, but all of that just happens automatically. Like you didn't get up this morning and go, oh, I wonder if I breathed overnight. You did, and so your limbic lobe is that part of your brain that is straight to the core, if you like. And so it bypasses logic. So when you're having a day where you're really overthinking things and overwhelmed, to just inhale an oil can alter your state. And I know, lots of people talk about exercise is another way you alter your state. But so you can diffuse, you can have a diffuser going. You can use it topically. So one of my favorite oils is a blend that I like to journal with, and it's called Awaken. It's actually a mega blend. It's 5 blends blended together. Man, that's powerful. And so I just use my portable diffuser and I put it on my hand and breathe it in.
So good.
3 seconds later.
Beforehand, before you get started?
Yeah, or during.
Yeah.
If you're new to journaling and you find you start and then you get a bit stuck and you've got a bit of time, add another oil. You can use a little lava stone diffuser and just drop some oil into that if you're somewhere where you can't take your diffuser. And that's beautiful. But you know what I often do is I put a drop on my journal page.
Yeah.
And what's exciting about lava stone jewelry, I don't wear a lot of jewelry, but I know you do, Deb. And
I don't have it on this morning.
Yeah, well, that's all right. So drop it on your page. What the oils do, research them. Like if you're feeling a particular feeling and you just can't get past it, this is the reference guide, but there's also a beautiful little app that I'm sure Deb can point you to. But if I'm feeling a particular feeling and I'm just stuck, then I will look up that in the reference guide or in the app and I'll find an oil that works for that. But Gary Young made a lot of emotional oils and they are powerful. So, I talked about gratitude before. Release is a great oil to journal with. You've got this block. Perhaps it's a mental block, perhaps it's a block of anger, whatever it might be, but a drop of release. And man, that's one of my favorites. I often wear that as perfume these days because I just love it. So do your research, look up about oils. When I researched Awaken, I had an awakening. I mean, my goodness me, what is in that oil is just incredible. It's almost all of the emotional oils in one bottle. So
that's awesome. Yeah, beautiful.
And if you want to write something that you really want to remember, probably more of an issue as you get into your 60s and beyond, use the same oil each time that you write about that thing. So you might be writing a prayer for a child. Use the same oil for that child. And what happens is when you re-smell that oil, the memories of those prayers will come back. I've said to people who are studying, if you've got kids who are doing exams and we're coming into VCE time, when they're studying, diffuse with a particular oil in the diffuser, and then when they go to their exam, put it on topically. Yeah. And what you're doing is tricking your brain to go back to that place when you first took that information in. So what we're talking about before, using all your senses.
And it happens naturally without us even thinking. An apple pie takes you back to when your nana made you one, or it was honey. My nan always had beautiful raw honey that she'd serve us up for breakfast. So I smell it and I'm just taken right back. Yeah. So it's doing that more intentionally to help take you back to those places.
Yeah, but for study, And for recall, if you've got to do a presentation, a lot of people have to do presentations for work. We prepare our PowerPoints. Well, while we're preparing them, diffuse a particular oil and then wear that oil on the day, and you will find it will just enhance. I mean, God made our brains and he knows how to best work them. He also made the oils. So isn't it good? The two come
absolutely. And like from what you're saying with the emotional oils, you can also to help reframe like an emotional healing process too, from how you used to feel to find
And I mean, there are protocols as well that you can follow up on. How to Have a Great Day protocol by Gary Young, it's 4 or 5 oils, doing them on particular parts of your body because that stirs up your system. So there's heaps more. They are just such a blessing, really, to have the oils and use them with journaling.
Well, I know we've got a lot of mums who are very, very busy in this group. Any tips for how to incorporate this when you're particularly busy?
Sure. If you've got really young children, just take 5 minutes while they're asleep and journal then. Don't try and fit it in at other times. You could even be thinking, you could have something by your sink when you're doing the dishes, and you could just jot something on a piece of paper and then add it to your journal later. So it doesn't have to be all encompassing. I sit down, I'm in a Zen mode, all the planets have to line up. They never do when you've got young kids. I've been there. We're out the other side now. We've got grandchildren, but it's busy. I get it. If you've got older kids and they've got homework time, why not sit at the table with them? While they're doing their homework, you do some journaling. Just sit and write in the quiet. And maybe even get them started on a journal, because I find that the rates of anxiety in young people these days is through the roof. And if you can get them onto a lifelong habit of actually processing what they're thinking and feeling in a positive way, you're going to stand them in good stead. So you could just say, okay, for the first 5 minutes before we get into your homework, let's do a bit of how we're feeling journaling. Younger kids, you can use smiley faces, and there are lots of resources there. There's a great thing, I'd have to find it. I think it's called my Big Think journal, and it's kids, and it's there's colouring in, and there's so they don't have to write, they can colour in, so even young kids. But if you did that for the first 5 minutes, often it's enough to calm them to then do their homework in a much better frame of mind, but it'll give you an opportunity to also do some journaling. A lot of people buy coffee when they're out these days, and we're on the run. We're always buying a takeaway and drinking it in the car. So every now and then, treat yourself and actually go into the cafe, buy it, sit down, take 10 minutes, take your journal, be intentional, and treat yourself. And I still do that occasionally. I'm busy with work and family, but I will go, okay, there's a little opportunity there. Why don't I go and buy a coffee, sit in the cafe, and treat myself to a bit of journaling time. If you're going to an appointment and for a fact you're going to be kept waiting, take your journal with you. Take a book for the kids to read and take your journal and just sit and then they'll call your name and you'll go, oh, all right, I'll go. And the old get up 10 minutes earlier than everyone else and set the intention for your day works for some people. For others, the earlier they get up, the earlier their kids get up. So, it's kind of a trade-off.
Catch 22,
so it might be the other end of the day when they're in bed to make gratitude part of your wind down routine at night. The research, all the neuroscience research says we need to be without blue light, so screens, for at least 30, if not 60 minutes a night before we try to go to bed, because otherwise our brain thinks we're still in the middle of the day, because our screens are making our brain think that's real light, and therefore it's midday and I should be on and up and thinking. And that's often why you get into bed and all those thoughts come flooding, because You've been so busy during the day, you've not had any downtime, and then whoop, here's a few things I've been meaning to tell you, and you're like, I want to go to sleep. So switch off your phone. You've heard it before. At least 30 minutes before you go to bed. So go and plug it in for its charge. Don't take it into the bedroom with you unless there's someone with a life-threatening disease who's going to ring you overnight.
Yeah,
it will wait. Trust me, it will. That's what you learn through 40-something years, more than that, nearly 50 years of journaling. No, more than that. Things don't stay the same. They change. So write down 3 things you're grateful for at the end of the day, and use an oil that will be calming, like peace and calming, stress away, and use it at that end of the day. So they're probably my best tips, because I know what it's like to be busy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think like you have just shared some incredibly powerful things, like so many things that benefit us for self-care today. We're very, very blessed. And I think if you've listened to Andrea and you understand the priority of journaling, then make it a priority in your day, because it really does. It's very transforming. And I've even done audio, grab that audio file on my phone sometimes if I've been driving somewhere, just to get down how I feel or what I'm thinking or about a particular situation. Andrea, are there any resources that you can direct us to before we finish off today?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the app that I talked about before, and I haven't actually got my phone because I thought it would ring. But
yes,
the reference guide to essential oils.
Yeah. So I think that's it.
Yeah, that one. Yeah. So in the guide section, a lot of the situations they're talking about are emotional health things. And so you can then look up and look at the top oils that they're recommending, and you might not have all of them, but I bet you've got one of them. You can, as I said, I've got a little Facebook group called The Art of Journaling. You're very welcome to search for that. And there's prompts and ideas. There's also a bit about getting started, and different types of journals that you can use. Do a little bit more research on the limbic lobe, Limbic lobe, and the role of the olfactory nerve. That our sense of smell is the closest we get to our brain. It's just phenomenal. So literally, that's why it takes 3 seconds, because the oil molecules travel up the olfactory nerve, they go into the olfactory bulb, and the next junction is the brain. So that's it. Like, there's nothing in between. And people talk about the blood-brain barrier. If you take something, you ingest it, can it get through to your brain? You snip it and it can. So this is healthy snipping, if you get my drift. And relax, breathe, and just write. And you don't judge yourself harshly. No one's going to mark it, as I said. And use those ideas of prompt books, because often when you're stuck, to open a book, we'll just do one last random My Future in lists. List projects you plan to get started on. And I've said another raised garden bed for my veggies. Those things can be really helpful. That's probably it.
Yeah, I think they are really helpful, because it inspires you about the things that you're passionate about and wanting to achieve and work towards, rather than feeling that you're just always floundering and what am I going to focus on today or this week? This
but that can be useful, like if you are going to start journaling with your kids. Prompts like that can be really helpful. And if you're trying to get an idea of what they're thinking, and we've all got kids who share everything, and then we've got kids who you just would love to know what's going on.
Minimum.
You get that. Right. Okay.
I saw a really good meme the other day, and it said, "You are living the life that you dreamed of 5 years ago. And it just came to me as you were talking today, because often we don't remember what we were dreaming of 5 years ago, but the journaling, and when I've looked back at my journaling, I absolutely love journaling. It reminds me of where I've come from and how much progress I've made. And I think that's a really important part of self-care, in congratulating yourself and your consistency and your perseverance at moving forward. Otherwise you think you're in the same place you were years
Feels like
ago.
Groundhog Day, like,
Yes.
I've been here before. And
Yeah.
you have, but you've brought another lesson. And I think, yeah, you're right. I mean, that's scriptural. The Bible says, you know, take the truth of scripture and write it down and talk about it with your kids, and, you know, write it on the lintels.
Of your house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for us to be writing is really powerful, and to review it and then celebrate is critical, because you do get stuck.
Yeah. Well, I've loved listening to you today, Andrea. Thank you so much for joining us. And I know our viewers will really enjoy just getting passionate about journaling. And make sure you guys go search for The Art of Journaling on Facebook. And if you'd like to learn more and hear more from Andrea. All right. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.